to Roadmap. Grammy-winning hip-hop artist Lauryn Hill canceled a performance in Israel this week due to being unable to organize a similar concert in the occupied Palestinian city of Ramallah. The decision came after weeks of pressure from proponents of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, calling on the singer to pull out of her appearance. The former Fuji singer took to Facebook to explain her decision, though she made no mention of the campaign, saying, quote, "I've wanted very much to bring our live performance to this part of the world, but also to be a presence supporting justice and peace. It is very important to me that my presence or message not be misconstrued or a source of alienation to either my Israeli or my Palestinian fans." So, did the pressure get to Lauryn Hill? Joining me now to discuss this is the co-founder of the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement, Omar Barghouti. Omar, thank you very much for joining us. Let me start off by asking you right off the top, did you guys play a role? Do you feel that you played a role in changing Lauryn Hill's decision from performing in Israel?
We think we appealed to her in a morally consistent way. We shared the information with her, and we think that helped convince her that lending her name to Israel's regime of occupation and apartheid would counter her support for justice and peace in Palestine and the region. Just like many artists refused to play Sun City during the South African apartheid, Lauryn Hill has just joined tens of major performers and music groups in refusing to play Israel while it continues its occupation, settlement buildings, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid regime over the Palestinians.
Omar, some of our viewers may not be familiar with the broader BDS movement, and I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about that. Start off by telling us what is the driving force behind the boycott, divestment, sanctions. What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve through this movement?
The boycott, divestment, and sanctions call was issued by an absolute majority of Palestinian civil society in 2005, trade unions, women's unions, students, academics, and so on. Inspired by the South African anti-apartheid movement and by the civil rights movement in the United States, we are calling for an isolation of Israel's regime in the academic, cultural, economic, and military spheres to achieve an end to the occupation, an end to the system of racial discrimination in Israel itself, which amounts to apartheid as defined by the United Nations, and the right of Palestinian refugees to return. So as a non-violent human rights movement, we aim to achieve Palestinian basic rights of freedom, justice, and equality, just as was done in South Africa and in the U.S. South during the Jim Crow period. So it's a time-honored tactic to call for a boycott, just like the Montgomery bus boycott, the Gandhi boycott against British colonial rule, and so on.
So how do you measure your progress? How do you measure your success? Is it working? Do you feel that you are actually changing anything on the ground?
Well, the BDS movement has been around for 10 years, and I think we've achieved far beyond our expectations when we launched the movement back in 2005. And this comes from testimonies by key Israeli figures like Shabtai Shavit, the former head of the Israeli Mossad, who wrote in a major newspaper last year in Israel that for the first time in his life, he's really worried about what he called the Zionist project. And the second most critical strategic threat to Israel's regime of occupation and apartheid, in his opinion, was the BDS movement and the possibility of European sanctions against Israel. And a very interesting factor that Shabtai Shavit mentioned was that Jewish support for BDS has grown tremendously, and that really worries Israel's regime of oppression because it just shatters the dichotomy of us versus them, Jews versus Arabs. It's not like that. This is a non-sectarian, anti-racist human rights movement that's inclusive of everyone. So it's a community that includes people who are working towards freedom, justice, and equality for everyone.
What are some of the successes? What are some of the successes that you have achieved? I understand the principles behind it, but for those even within the Palestinian society, and I've spent a lot of time there, I've talked to people, not everyone is necessarily convinced that it can change the reality on the ground. So what is it that you feel you have achieved, and what are some of the key successes that you highlight from this movement?
That would take hours, but I'll try to summarize some of the most important. I think in the United States, major academic associations like the American Studies Association, Asian American Studies Association, African Literature Association, and others have called for a full academic boycott of Israel, which is a boycott of all universities, not individuals. Many major artists like Roger Waters and many others have joined the cultural boycott of Israel. In 2014, we started to see a real economic impact as well. The Dutch pension fund, PGGM, which is a $200 billion fund, has divested from the top 5 Israeli banks because of their involvement in the construction of illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied territory. The Norwegian pension fund, one of the largest in the world, has also divested from Israeli companies invested in the occupation. And the Bill Gates Foundation divested from G4S, and the largest security company in the world, because of its involvement in Israeli human rights violations. So we've started to impact Israel economically after having a lot of impact academically and culturally, if you will, to the extent that...
And do you think that would... Sorry to cut you off at that point, but you're saying you're impacting Israel economically. Do you think that it will have a domino effect for Palestinians? And that's what you ultimately want to do, which is you want to have freedom for Palestinians.
Absolutely. Without isolating Israel's regime, there's no way to hold it to account to international law and universal principles of human rights. Without external pressure and internal resistance together, there's no way to compel Israel to recognize Palestinian rights, to end the occupation, end apartheid, and recognize the right of return. This was the formula that worked in South Africa: internal resistance and external pressure. We cannot do without one of those.
Let me switch gears a little bit and bring in the perspective of those that are critical of BDS. And certainly here in this country, in the United States, there's a tremendous pressure against the BDS movement. Some have labeled it anti-Semitic. Others have warned that its attempt to alienate and isolate Israel is dangerous. And there is an actual legislative effort within the U.S. Congress to try and make, or to criminalize, if you will, BDS to some extent. Talk to us a little bit about those challenges that you're facing here in the United States.
The so-called anti-Semitism charge is completely ill-founded. Jewish support within the United States, as now the former Mossad chief has recognized, is growing tremendously. Jewish Voice for Peace, one of the key partners of the BDS movement in the United States, has grown a lot, especially since Israel's latest massacre in Gaza in the summer of 2014. Attempts by the Israel lobby to criminalize support for BDS is not just anti-democratic, it's not just violating the First Amendment, the free speech amendment. It also goes against a time-honored strategy of resisting injustice in this country. What would Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks think if they hear that somebody is trying to criminalize boycott to achieve justice? So it's really an anti-democratic measure that Israel lobby is trying, and it shows the despair. They've tried so hard to win hearts and minds, and they've lost. They've failed tremendously. There's a major shift in public opinion in the United States. A Brookings Institute poll last November, shows that 39% of the U.S. public are ready to support sanctions against Israel because of its construction of illegal settlements in the occupied territories. This is unheard of. There's a shift among liberal Democrats, among women, African Americans, Latino Americans, and the Israel lobby recognizes this shift. It's no longer completely one-sided as it used to be.
And Omar, finally, just one last question. Is the objective of BDS to enhance the two-state solution, or are you calling for a one-state solution? Or are you not taking a political position on the outcome, but just on the reality on the ground?
As a human rights movement, and as the largest coalition in Palestinian society with very diverse political opinions, we decided strategically, since launching BDS in 2005, to stick to our human rights mandate: end the occupation, end apartheid, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees. So we completely avoid any discussion of one state, two states, or any other politics beyond our human rights mandate. So to have a common denominator among all these Palestinian groups and unions and women's groups and so on, we've kept to our human rights mandate, not any political decisions.
Omar Barghouti, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you, sir, very much for joining us. You're watching Roadmap on Shift by MSNBC. We'll be right back.